Hare Krishna. So thank you everyone for joining us today. It's never easy to come this early in the morning on Saturday. So thank you everyone for coming. We're in for a very special treat. We have our guest speaker, His Grace Bhuta Bhavana, joining us all the way from London, England. So Bhuta Bhavana has been practicing Bhakti Yoga for over 25 years. Initially, he was drawn to this yoga during his studies at the London School of Economics. He's a graduate in philosophy and economics and has become a sought-after speaker addressing institutes like Oxford and Cambridge. His insights on Bhakti wisdom has gained popularity in Europe, India, Canada, and the US. He focuses on practical application, especially in leadership, relationships, and personal spiritual growth. Bhuta Bhavana also mentors professionals globally, and his recent podcast explores self-esteem and the team personality model. So you can connect with him on his Instagram. And personally, I've had the opportunity and the fortune to interact and learn from His Grace Bhuta Bhavana. So I can attest that all his talks, lectures, classes are very wonderful, very practical, full of knowledge. So please do check them out. And with that, we will warmly welcome Prabhu with 3 loud Haribols. Haribol! 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 And for the folks online, if you can please turn your cameras on, it will be easier for you to connect with the speaker and also for the speaker to connect with you. So with that, I can pass it on to Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much for. Okay, I can hear a little bit of reverberation. Maybe if others can mute so that it's not coming through twice in terms of sound. Okay, that's better. Thank you so much. So I want to say, well, a great honor it is to be here, to be able to share with all of you, and in this sharing, we're all able to learn, to grow, and to develop as we're learning from the Srimad Bhagavatam. I also want to take this opportunity to say thank you to the temple management, the temple council as well for helping to make this arrangement happen. Really grateful to be here. So what we will do, I will just offer some respects to the Bhagavatam. Then we will read certain aspects of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So we are reading around the area of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 6, text number 28 through to 33. We'll just focus in on a few key areas within that section, and I'll also give some context as well. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Before we read, just before we start, there's one thing I wanted to share, and that is that we know that we tend to recall about 70% of what we discuss, 80% of what we experience, and 90 to 95% of what we share. I'm going to therefore encourage all of us on this session, as we go through, if you have any questions, we'll make some time for questions at the end. But most importantly, I'm going to encourage all of us, even beyond the class, to share something that we heard in this section of Bhagavatam, something that we reflected on, discussed together in this section of Bhagavatam, maybe even something that was asked as a question. But we're going to encourage this culture. The Srimad Bhagavatam is a voice of the Lord. But whenever we reflect on the Lord's teachings, whenever we reflect on the teachings of the Lord's devotees, and especially we'll see here, whenever we repeat or share that glorification, it has such extremely powerful effect on the mind, on the heart, and it really waters the seed of our devotion and allows us to really grow in spiritual life. Over the years of trying to study and share these teachings, I've constantly seen how there are many opportunities for us to really grow and flourish in spiritual life, but it requires a certain type of application. And if we don't apply the teachings properly, we don't see the same outcomes. Okay, so as we stated, we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam. What I will do is I will share my screen. So if you bear with me. We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, my computer's a little bit slow to develop, so that's fine. But what I'll do is I will actually read first this particular section of the Bhagavatam. What I thought we would do is we'll read the verses themselves, and then what we'll do is we'll focus in on a particular purport, which we'll then explore in a bit more detail, but while also covering some of the key points from previous verses as well. Okay, so just to give some background to this particular area of the Bhagavatam, all the Bhagavatam is incredibly powerful, transformative, beneficial. So this chapter, so first canto, which is on creation, chapter 6, as you can see, titled Conversation Between Narada and Vyasadeva. And at the beginning of this chapter, Vyasadeva is asking a few questions to Narada. He's inquiring from Narada as to how he became the person that he is. And then as we're getting into the area that we're reading from, so beginning with verse number 28, we hear Narada start to explain so many things to Vyas. Okay, so what we will do is we will read the English, so 28, 29, all the way through to 32. We'll chant 33, we'll read the purport to 33, then we'll make some summary points. Okay, so this is Narada speaking to Vyasadeva. He says as follows: having been awarded a transcendental body, befitting an associate of the personality of Godhead, I quit the body made of 5 material elements, and thus all acquired fruitive results of work, karma, stopped. Text number 29. At the end of the millennium, when the personality of Godhead, Lord Narayan, lay down within the water of devastation, Brahma began to enter into him, along with all creative elements, and I also entered through his breathing. So here, Narada is talking about how when the Lord retracts all of his energy, including the living entities as well, then Narada entered also into the Lord's form. Prabhupada also touches upon that in the purport. After 4,300,000,000 solar years, when Brahma awoke to create again by the will of the Lord, all the rishis like Marichi, Angira, Atri, and so on were created from the transcendental body of the Lord, and I also appeared along with them. Text number 31. Since then, by the grace of the Almighty Vishnu, I travel everywhere without restriction, both in the transcendental world and in the 3 divisions of the material world. This is because I'm fixed in unbroken devotional service to the Lord. Text number 32. And thus I travel constantly singing the transcendental message of the glories of the Lord, vibrating this instrument called a veena, which is charged with transcendental sound and which was given to me by Lord Krishna. So we're going to chant, we're going to read 33, including the purport, then we'll have some discussion. So the Sanskrit, Pragayanta Swaviryani Tirthapada Priyasrava Sravaha Ahuta Eva Me Shigram Darshanam Yati Chetasi. Translation. The Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, whose glories and activities are pleasing to hear, at once appears on the seat of my heart as if called for, as soon as I begin to chant his holy activities. This is a very, very powerful, very important verse and purport. purport by Srila Prabhupada. The absolute personality of Godhead is not different from his transcendental name, form, pastimes, and sound vibrations thereof. As soon as the pure devotee engages himself in the pure devotional service of hearing, chanting, and remembering the name, fame, and activities of the Lord, at once he, that's Krishna, becomes visible to the transcendental eyes of the pure devotee by reflecting himself on the mirror of the heart by spiritual television. Therefore, a pure devotee who is related with the Lord in loving transcendental service can experience the presence of the Lord at every moment. It is a natural psychology in every individual case that a person likes to hear and enjoy his personal glories enumerated by others. That is a natural instinct, and the Lord, being also an individual personality like others, is not an exception to this psychology. Because, and this is a very powerful point Prabhupada is making here, because psychological characteristics visible in the individual souls are but reflections of the same psychology in the absolute Lord. The only difference is that the Lord is the greatest personality of all and absolute in all his affairs. If therefore the Lord is attracted by the pure devotee's chanting of his glories, there is nothing astonishing. Since he is absolute, he can appear himself in the picture of his glorification, the two things being identical. Srila Narada chants the glorification of the Lord, not for his personal benefit, but because the glorifications are identical with the Lord. Narada Muni penetrates into the presence of the Lord by the transcendental chanting. Okay. Gyanata Mirandasya, Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Om Militam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha, Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam, Stapitam Yena Bhutale, Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam, Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam, Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha, Shri Rupam Sagrajatam, Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tvam Sajivam, Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam, Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita, Shri Vishakam Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate, Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate, Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi, Radhe Vrindavaneshwari, Rishabhanu Sutta Devi, Pranamami Hari Priye, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we request the blessings of all the assembled devotees, so that by your blessings, by your mercy, by your empowerment, we can speak something today that will help us all on our spiritual journey. And again, I really want to say how grateful I am to be amongst all of you in this wonderful culture of bhakti. Because bhakti is a real life. It is the juice or the essence of life. Let's try to explore some of these wonderful insights which the Srimad Bhagavatam is giving us. So we started at verse number 28. Narada is speaking to Vyas, answering his questions. Everything about the Srimad Bhagavatam is a transcendental teaching. Everything. We're not just meant to understand. We're meant to have such a deep understanding that actually we embody. And that embodiment, that comes through proper inquiry. you'll see again and again, it's not just the substance of the Bhagavatam, it's also the form of the Bhagavatam. Everything has meaning, pregnant with meaning. So when we read the Bhagavatam, just as we're seeing at the beginning of this chapter, we're being given an approach to knowledge. And you'll find that the beauty and the power and the elegance of the Bhagavatam is that the Bhagavatam is just like fine cloth. Fine cloth means what? It means everything is intricately done. Everything is intricately put together. And it's put together in such a quality and harmonious way that we understand that there's great value here. What do I mean by that? This chapter begins with Vyasadeva asking all these questions. That is a reflection. Vyasadeva is actually an incarnation, but he's taking that mood of humility and submission to his teacher, to his guru, Narada. And that, just the quality of that exchange reflects Krishna's own teachings to Arjuna. Tadvidi pratena, priprasnena sevaya, upadekshanti te jnanam, jnaninas tatvadashinaha. So what you have in the beauty of the Bhagavatam is you have teachings which are constantly reflected, reverberated, echoed, role modeled. So Krishna will say something and his devotees will do it. And then you'll see the result of that behavior. So you can call this the ecosystem of transformation. Krishna will tell Arjuna, you approach a bona fide spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, render service unto him, right? He can show you the truth because he is Tadvidi, he has seen the truth. Vyasadeva here, he begins by making these requests to Narada. How is it possible that you have this kind of body? Right? Narada is explaining, having been awarded a transcendental body befitting an associate of the personality of Godhead, the body made of 5 material elements, and thus all acquired fruitive results of work karma stopped. That's a really important point. What are these 5 material elements? Again, reflection of the Bhagavad Gita. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Bhumiya ponalavaya karmana buddhievacha ahankrityami bina prakriti ashtada. Earth, water, fire, air, ether. These 5 material elements which make up this material body. Yeah? Then he will go on to explain the subtle body. Karmana buddhievacha ahankara ityami bina prakriti ashtada. Karmana buddhievacha. Mana means mind, buddhi means intelligence, ahankara means false ego. Yeah? So the body is made up of certain ingredients. The body is made up of certain ingredients, and every ingredient has its flavor, isn't it? Right? I'm sure some of you are good cooks. I'm not such a good cook, right? I like to use lots of technology to make shortcuts, right? So I've got a soup maker, I've got this, I've got that. But some of you are good cooks. And you know every ingredient, you know what each ingredient brings to the recipe. Unfortunately, the ingredients of the material body are ultimately a recipe for disaster. The ingredients of the material body are a recipe for disaster. What do I mean by that? Janma mrityu jara vyadi, dukkha dosha nudashanam. Birth, old age, disease, death. No matter what kind of body we have, the body has karma, and that body is reflective or under the control of the 3 material modes of nature. It's a very powerful thing when we are in the association of devotees to see each other properly. As I've been studying, the psychology according to scripture, there's so many amazing things. For example, you will increasingly see in this material world that so much we hanker for attention. Often, if a person grows up and they weren't seen, by their caregivers. They weren't seen by their parents, parents being the primary caregivers. It can create a mentality where we go out into the world and we're constantly desperate for attention. Because we didn't have that samskar, that impression that I'm seen, heard, which means that I'm valued and appreciated. Therefore, I may go out into the world and I'm hungry, I'm desperate, I'm needy, I need everyone to notice me. To the extent that I don't have that within myself, to that extent I may crave it from other people. So the material body has these elements: physical body, subtle body, and the impressions in the subtle body, the ahankara, the identification with that which is not truly me. These are ingredients of the material body. And because we have a certain kind of vehicle, because we identify with a certain type of vehicle, we often have certain types of challenges as a result. A good example of this is the internet. You know, people are so desperate I need attention. I need to have a certain number of people watching my content. I need to have a certain number of likes. I need to be seen. But this verse is speaking of something higher. Narada is saying that now he's got a transcendental body. He is not limited to the actions and reactions of this material body. He's moved beyond it. And this devotional service is the vehicle by which we can be completely free. It's the vehicle by which we can be completely free, because I no longer identify with my vehicle. I know that the body is different from me. I know that the mind is different from me. These are vehicles that I'm using, but the vehicle is not the same as the driver. This is so important. What I constantly see in so many ways in our spiritual life is that Krishna is so kind. He wants to give us the lesson before the test. I repeat, Krishna is so kind. He wants to give us the lesson before the test. And the test is the time of death. Ante kali chamameva smaran mutva kalevrayam. Ya prati samadbhavam yati naschasha samshayaha. Whatever we think of at the time of death, Krishna has told Arjuna, to that state we will attain. So we are all in a race against time to become fully Krishna conscious. Narada is speaking about how he got this transcendental body, so he moved from the material situation or material sphere to the spiritual sphere. What we are meant to do is to develop such deep spiritual impressions in the heart through engaging in devotional service sincerely, to saturate the consciousness so that we are absorbed in Krishna, so that when we leave this world, the same absorption in Krishna that we have cultivated in life will transform us at the time of death back to the spiritual platform. So life is a preparation for death, and death is actually an illusion if we are on the transcendental platform. If we have reached that stage, then death only attains to the body and the mind, but we will know that we will live forever. It's very, very important. Another wonderful point about this series of verses is this ability to see things clearly. There's a wonderful realization that we can have about the way that the material energy works on our bodies and works on our lives. There's these three modes of material nature: sattvam, rajas, tama, iti, gune, prakriti, sambhavaha. So in the mode of ignorance, it's as bad as it looks. Okay, so something is the mode of ignorance. You go into a situation, it's dirty, it's unclean. The mode of ignorance is as bad as it looks. The mode of passion looks better than it is. Okay, so sometimes when we're dealing with situations in the mode of passion, it looks amazing. The packaging looks amazing. But when you get into it, you find that it's not quite what it seems to be. You know, sometimes I remember years ago when they probably still do it right now. When a movie gets released, they will spend so much money hyping up the movie. It's the best film ever, starring X, Y, and Z, blockbuster, the biggest film in this genre of all time. And then you actually see the movie and you think, it wasn't all that. Right? The advertising, the hype was greater than the reality. That's the mode of passion. The mode of passion looks better than it actually is. The mode of goodness is better than it looks. The mode of goodness is better than it looks. We know that from the Bhagavad Gita. What does Krishna say in the Bhagavad Gita? He says, activities in the mode of goodness, happiness in the mode of goodness begins like poison, but ends like nectar. So the mode of ignorance is as bad as it looks. Mode of passion looks better than it actually is. Mode of goodness is better than it looks. But then we have the transcendental platform. Here Narada's talking about being awarded a transcendental body. The transcendental platform, Shuddha Sattva, is literally out of this world. So when we have this proper spiritual vision, we can make proper choices. Do I want to choose something in ignorance? Do I want to choose something in passion? No. Even goodness? No. I'm looking for something which is fully transcendental. This understanding about how to see the world clearly is so deeply important, because our decisions are made upon our perception. You sometimes see devotees, and you think, this devotee doesn't behave so well. In fact, I hear this again and again. You sometimes see devotees and you think, you know what? I know people who are not devotees and they behave better than many of the devotees that I know. I'm laughing because I know some of you in the room thinking, I've had that thought before as well, right? So sometimes it's like that. You think, how is that possible? Because they're taking prasadam, right? Prabhupada says in the Bhagavad Gita, in the purples, Prabhupada says in Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, that the devotees are like this, they're like that. We see these exalted qualities. And then we go to the temple. And sometimes there's a bit of a disconnect between what we read and what we see. And we may even think, am I in the wrong place? Like, did I take a wrong turn somewhere? Like, what's happening? Again, the beauty of the Bhagavatam is it's like a set of lenses on the world. But the difference is it allows us to see things accurately. I'm going to give you a few insights into this. My proposal to all of us is that we all have a form of unconscious misperception. And the more that we read the scriptures, the more that we hear, the more that we inquire, and most importantly, not just reading, hearing, and inquiring, the more that we chant, but most importantly, the more that we do this with a sincere desire to know the truth, and I echo this, the more the entire teaching comes alive for us. For example, and I was speaking to someone about this. I'm not sure if they wanted to hear this, to be honest, but I just wanted to tell them the truth anyway. They were making that point to me. I've got some people that I know, colleagues, friends, etc. They're not devotees, and they often behave better than the devotees. And I told them, I said, you're not seeing things clearly. And they were a bit taken aback. And I understood why they would be taken aback. And I started to unpack it for them. I said, you're not making a proper comparison. In my almost 30 years of trying to practice Krishna consciousness, I started to see that there's this unconscious misperception. What I told them was the following. I said, what you will find is that you're not comparing like for like. I said to them, what you will find is that if you look more closely, what you're doing is you're comparing the devotees in the mode of ignorance or passion with your friends or colleagues who are in the mode of goodness. And I said that if you wanted to make a proper comparison, what you would actually have to do is compare the devotees in the mode of ignorance to the non-devotees in the mode of ignorance. to compare the devotees in the mode of passion to the non-devotees in the mode of passion, and compare the devotees in the mode of goodness to the non-devotees in the mode of goodness. That was my point. That's a fair comparison. Not that we compare the lowest in one category with the highest in another category. That's not a fair comparison. Again, through this understanding, we can correct the unconscious misperception that comes and that will always be there as long as we are affected by the modes of material nature. Why do we say that Narada Muni and such great souls, their perception is perfect? It's alluded to here. It's alluded to in this verse 28. It's because their body is transcendental. And therefore, the defects of the material body, and these are defects which are so close to our heart. This is why it gets so difficult and so dangerous. When a defect is so close to me, I can't see it. It's just like if you put something right in front of you, if I put my finger just right underneath my eye, I can't see my finger anymore clearly because it's so close to me that I can't see it. But the beauty is, because you're looking at me from the outside, you can say to me, BBD, just let you know, look, your finger's there. This is what it looks like. It's so close to me that I can't see it. But you, because you have that distance, because you have perspective, you can see what I can't even see about myself. Therefore, the 6 loving exchanges of the devotees is so important. In verse 30, it talks about this huge duration of time. After 4,300,000,000 solar years, when Brahma awoke to create again by the will of the Lord, all the rishis, and so on were created from the transcendental body of the Lord. It's so important to understand things in perspective. Again, carrying on with that theme. You see, some of the things that we take for granted, to other living entities, even on this planet, they'll think like, wow, ISKCON Calgary, they've got mystic powers, mystic abilities. What do I mean by that? See, let's break this down for you. So our duration of life is relative to the type of body that we have. Okay, I'm touching upon this concept which is given in this verse, text number 30. Because Brahma, his body is of a much more subtle quality. He lives for a much longer period of time. For him, we're like ants. We exist for just like a flicker of a moment compared to his length of life. And for us, the duration of life that we have, for an ant, they think, wow, this is amazing. These humans, they're like demigods. They exist for such a long period of time. They can move huge distances in one step. Because the ant's body is very small in dimension, it may take a day to walk from one side of the house to another side of the house. For us, we can do the same distance in seconds. So bodies are relative. Time is relative to body. And this is really important because, again, it puts everything in perspective. So just like the ant looks at us and thinks, wow, that's mystical. We may look at the demigods and think, oh, that's incredible. Wow, they can do this, they can do that. But on their platform, it's normal. And this is why we're not trying to aim to go back to the heavenly planets. What is the heavenly world? The heavenly world is, you've experienced the equivalent of visiting the heavenly planets every time you go on holiday. Isn't it? Every time you go on holiday, you leave work alone, right? You check into some hotels, go swimming pool, probably in some really wonderful climate. People will be serving you meals, right? You'll be lying down at the swimming pool, drinking this and drinking that. Nice meals. You may play some sports. There's absolutely no work. You don't even check your work email, right? But the difficulty is what? The difficulty is we can't stay there. We can go there, but we can't stay there. And you know what? Sometimes, I'm sure many of us have experienced it. Sometimes when you go back to work, it's even harder because you now have the contrast of what it was like to be in a really luxury environment, just living it up, right? That's the whole point. These are temporary situations. That situations don't last. No matter how long the body, and no matter how long the length of life of that particular body is, from the highest to the lowest, Abrahma Bhuva Loka. From the highest planet to the lowest, these are all places of birth, old age, disease, death. So we can't stay there. We want a permanent solution to the trouble of the material existence. In verse 31, Narada is saying that since by the grace of the Almighty Vishnu, since then, by the grace of the Almighty Vishnu, he can travel everywhere. Now he also explains the formula. Why was he given that freedom? This is really important. This is because I am fixed in unbroken devotional service of the Lord. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to put it before you that this is the magic formula. This is our magic formula for freedom. When we are fixed in unbroken devotional service, we become free. This is the secret of the Bhagavatam. This is the secret of the Bhagavatam. When we surrender to the material energy, what happens? When we surrender to the material energy, we become more addicted and enslaved. Right? Prabhupada will sometimes explain, how does a living entity take birth as a tree? It's because that living entity lived in such a way that it was in the mode of ignorance, showing off its naked body. And the laws of material nature are so strong that the laws of material nature see that behavior, see that desire and say, well, okay, hold on. I've given you this human form of life, which is meant for self-realization. But instead, all you're doing is showing off your naked body. If that's what you want, then there's no point giving you a human body, because the human body, the human vehicle is meant for something else. If you want to be naked, no problem. There's a body for that. So what I'm going to do now is I'll give you a body which will facilitate your own activities and desires. Therefore, the living entity that was previously a human being now takes birth as a tree. You know, every year at Kartik, we will recite these Dhammadarasakam prayers. And in these prayers, we will hear these pastimes of Nalakuvera and Manigriva. They were great demigods and they were enjoying, but they were naked. Actually, when great sage, which was a great sage? Who was a great sage who walked by? Can anyone tell me? Who was a great sage who walked by?
Narada.
Exactly. This our same Narada. The ladies, they actually had some culture. They covered themselves. But Nalakuvera and Manigriva were so intoxicated that they didn't even understand what they were doing. So hence they became cursed to exist as trees. But because the curse and the blessing of great sages such as Narada are so powerful, because they always have good intention. Therefore, they were actually ultimately liberated by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we understand that there are different types of bodies, but there's also freedom. And that freedom, the freedom comes when we surrender. This is the amazing secret of devotional life. You will actually find, and you can test this, you will actually find that the more someone surrenders to Krishna, the more they actually have freedom. It's an amazing paradox. The opposite is also true. The more that someone actually doesn't surrender to Krishna, the more they actually become restricted. It's an amazing paradox that plays out in the life of every single living entity. In other words, there are two types of structure. You could say that the material life is represented by the prison. It's a kind of structure. but it's a structure that does not allow you any freedom. You get restricted, held within. But then there's another type of structure, which is devotional practice. That is like a ladder. A ladder is also a structure, but it has a different effect. What does the ladder allow us to do? The ladder allows me to reach a certain position that I could not reach by myself. So it's a structure, but it's a structure or a framework that gives liberation. That's the difference. It is a framework that actually liberates the living entity. So therefore, devotional service, if it's practiced properly, as Narada Muni is alluding to here, we actually gain that freedom because of being fixed in unbroken devotional service. And he'll go on to explain what does it allow him to do? Text number 32, and thus I travel, constantly singing the transcendental message of the glories of the Lord. Now to text number 33. The Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, whose glories and activities are pleasing to hear, at once appears on the seat of my heart as if called for as soon as I begin to chant his holy activities. This verse in purple, if we are able to capture this, spiritual life becomes thrilling. There's a lot here that Prabhupada talks about in the verse in the purple. Prabhupada in this purple says that Krishna's psychology and our psychology have certain things in common. You know, in my day job, I train managers, and it's a very interactive kind of training. And it always amazes me that how much people love to talk about themselves. People love to talk about themselves. Sometimes you have to rein them in. You know, it's like, right, we have to go for a break now. Stop, please stop. You know, but people love to talk about themselves. And sometimes we wonder, where does that come from? Or people love to hear their own glorification. Even devotees, right? You've seen that sometimes. Even devotees, you start glorifying them and they'll be like, oh, no, I'm not, no, that's not, no, I'm not that great. You know, but really what we're thinking is, tell me more. tell me more. Tell me more. Is this being recorded? Like, you know, like, can I play this back in my own time? So sometimes that desire for that appreciation or glorification is very, very strong. Prabhupada here is talking about where that comes from. What does he say? It is a natural psychology in every individual case that a person likes to hear and enjoy his personal glories enumerated by others. It's just how it is, right? But he's saying that this comes from Krishna. He's saying that desire comes from Krishna. But what does Krishna do when that happens? And this is really the secret of our hearing, chanting the glories and the holy name of the Lord. This is the secret. What we're doing is we're glorifying someone. We're calling upon someone, and we're trying to call upon that person with love. One of the most powerful ways we can do this is through the gateway of gratitude. In other words, we can call a name and we can glorify with love through the gateway of gratitude. I want to invite you to just take a moment to think about something that you're genuinely grateful to Krishna for. For some of you, it may be your partner. You know, just out of the blue, Krishna arranged for you to meet someone and maybe marry someone who really is a really wonderful partner to you and who's helped you grow in so many ways. For someone else, it could be even an opportunity for service. Krishna gave you a service that really thrills you, infuses you. It just really gives you so much excitement and meaning in your life. For someone else, it's your spiritual master. You know, you can genuinely feel, I'm just so grateful for my guru that Krishna allowed me to have. For different people, it could be your son, daughter, whoever it is. Ultimately, not a blade of grass moves without the sanction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's about tuning in, recognizing, wow, I'm so grateful to Krishna. He gave me this. I didn't deserve it, but he's just so kind to me. When we take a moment to reflect upon the gifts that came from Krishna, the gifts of God, when we reflect upon the gifts of God with gratitude, and when we chant and glorify Krishna on that basis, magic happens. The reason why our lives are often missing that juice, that thrill, that ecstasy, is because we've forgotten the gifts of God. In other words, Prabhupada says familiarity breeds contempt. Breeds contempt. When Narada is chanting the glories of the Lord, he's explaining this verse, the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, whose glories and activities are pleasing to hear, at once appears on the seat of my heart as if called for as soon as I begin to chant his holy activities. For me, this really stood out. It reminded me of one of the most powerful teachings that I constantly forget in this Krishna consciousness endeavor. It is easy to think that happiness is based upon what I have and what I'm doing materially. What this verse is really reminding us all is that true happiness, like deep joy, deep spiritual fulfillment and fullness, is literally a state of the heart. Think about that point carefully. Deep happiness is actually the state that our heart is in. Prabhupada is alluding to this in the purple. The absolute personality of Godhead is not different from his transcendental name, form, pastimes, and the sound vibrations thereof. As soon as a pure devotee engages himself in the pure devotional service of hearing, chanting, and remembering the name, fame, and activities of the Lord, at once he becomes visible to the transcendental eyes of the pure devotee. And this is how now Prabhupada says how it happens: by reflecting himself on the mirror of the heart by spiritual television. Ladies and gentlemen, each and every one of us within ourselves have a spiritual television. But unfortunately, and this is a really unfortunate thing, for many of us, that television, that spiritual television is broken. It's not working properly. And because that spiritual television is not working properly, therefore, we don't experience the ecstatic presence of Krishna. We don't see the ecstatic presence of Krishna. And where Krishna is present, everything is also present. You're not looking for more money. You're not looking for more attention. We're ultimately looking for the ecstasy of divine love. And everything in this material world is simply a poor substitute for that spiritual ecstasy that we are all looking for. So therefore, the means by which we can achieve that is, and I'm going to emphasize this very, very carefully, it is the proper and spiritually intelligent practice of devotional life. It is not enough to practice Krishna consciousness. We have to practice Krishna consciousness intelligently and personally. Well, I've seen over many decades of practice with many devotees and communities, is that devotees who are often having a great experience in spiritual life are the devotees who have applied devotional service in an intelligent and personal way to their circumstances. I want to encourage all of us, therefore, that we have a journey from where we are to where Narada Muni is. We can get there. We can get there. It's just a question of the proper application. I'll give you an example. I've been studying Vedic psychology from the scriptures. It's incredible because as I study Vedic psychology, I can see the parallels between what I'm reading and hearing and what I see in my own practice and in the practices of other devotees. Let me give you an example. I was in Golokadam. This was a few years ago, and His Holiness Satchidananda Maharaj was giving a class. And in the class, he was talking about the importance of spiritual practice at the beginning and I'm gonna okay, I've muted that person, no problem. The enthusiasm is appreciated though. So he was speaking about what happens at the beginning and end of our day. And then as I studied Vedic psychology and also saw its parallels with neuroscience, I understood that there's a term called neuroplasticity. That means there are times when the mind is more impressionable. Okay? So what someone does right at the beginning of the day and what someone does right at the end of the day are particularly important. Now just take a moment to think about this. In the modern, highly technological world that we live in, what do people tend to do right at the beginning of the day? What do they reach for right at the beginning of the day? What do you think, honestly? You feel free to unmute. What do you think people reach for right at the beginning of the day?
Cell phone, mobile.
Exactly. And that's not accidental, by the way. The way that the technology has been designed, yes, we really care about you. I'm a mobile phone manufacturer. I really care about you. I care about you so much that I put an alarm clock on your phone so that you can use the alarm clock on your phone. And when you wake up in the morning, the first thing that you reach out for is your alarm clock. What you don't know, well, I didn't tell you, is that first thing in the morning, your mind is highly impressionable. So when you reach out for your alarm, when you reach out for the phone, first thing in the morning to switch off that alarm, it leaves a samskar. It will leave an impression on your mind. And because you reached out for the phone at the beginning of the day, it leaves such a deep impression that you're going to be reaching out for your phone throughout your day. Yeah? Because samskar means habit. In Prema Bhakti Chandrika, it is explained that one should offer prayers to the spiritual master at the beginning and at the end of the day. Think about it. Think about it. You have the same neuroplasticity, but now instead of putting something material into the mind, leaving an impression in the mind, which makes it harder to focus on Krishna, if I do prayers at the beginning of my day, I put something spiritual deeply into my consciousness, which will make it easier for me to remember Krishna, easier for me to be absorbed in spiritual ecstasy and devotional service, and ultimately easier for me to make sure that at the end of life, I'm going to go back to Godhead. Think about it. There are so many things that we do that either can be devoted to Krishna or devoted to Maya. And so many of these things are done without us even understanding the significance of them. Therefore, even this chanting, we were in Radhakund. I was there with the TSI. It's a group of youth from America. Not last year, the year before. So they have a retreat in Vrindavan at the end of the year. We were in Radhakund. And it was absolutely amazing, right? We were there, but we were about to move to another place, and the sadhu came up to us, and I'll be honest, when the sadhu said this to me, I could understand Krishna was trying to give me a message, and he said something which left a deep impression because I've been studying Vedic psychology and then looking at how we can manage, pressure, and we even teach this in work. We teach about how to manage stress, how to be resilient. The sadhu came up to us and we were about to run off to another place in the Dham. And he said, why, you're always so busy. You Westerners are always so busy. Slow down. And then he said to us, he said, you cannot be, if you're always stressed or too busy, you cannot become self-realized. That's what he actually told us. It's if you're always running around, always too stressed out, too busy, you cannot become self-realized. Very, very interesting. I remember since hearing that particular point, I realized the significance of getting oneself into a receptive state of mind in order to engage in spiritual practice. Again, what happens when you're receptive? You know, Prabhupada always, and the Bhagavatam also speaks about being attentive. If one is stressed, one is also distracted. If one is able to be calm, receptive, attentive, again, the mind increases its neuroplasticity. So what we do first thing in the morning increases that the mind is more impressed by it. What we do last thing at night, the mind is also more impressed by it. What we do with attention, the mind is also more impressed by it. Therefore, when Prabhupada says chant attentively, what he's giving us is actually a scientific, neuroscientific understanding of the practice. If that practice is done, and Prabhupada will talk about this in the purport, with rapt attention, then you will make far more accelerated spiritual progress from the same activity. You know, so behind all these activities, there's a mechanism. It's so amazing. I was on a call 1 or 2 days ago, and it was a group, and there was a bit of a falling out, to be very transparent with you. And someone had not given some work in, and they'd not met some expectations. And so the other devotees on the call, they were really upset. But I was so appreciative of the way that they conducted themselves, because even though they were really upset, they were still respectful. But they were honest, and they talked about what was really on their mind. You know, we're concerned now about this service or this project because, you know, you said you're going to do this. I didn't hear from you, etc. And it really stressed me out. And then I was kind of facilitating the conversation so we could get clarification on what needed to happen going forward. And it was amazing, because the person who was on the receiving end of the concern, he was honest. He actually said, I didn't realize that this was so important to you. I didn't realize that you needed me to complete this activity so that you could do your activity. And when I saw that, it hit me. I thought, wow, this is what happens with our devotional communities. We read so much, we hear so much, but we don't understand why so much. So we may read, oh, be attentive. Yeah, be attentive. Yeah, but I don't know why. So if I don't do anything, if I don't chant attentively, nothing much, I don't think anything happens. Usually, unfortunately, but being very honest, most of the people around me, they're also not chanting attentively. So we all seem to be the same. So I don't think it's a big deal. But then I don't make that same great spiritual advancement that I can make. But because my friends are also inattentive, just like I'm inattentive, we all look the same and we all think we're doing okay. But because I don't understand the why, I don't understand that when I chant attentively, that chanting actually leaves a deep impression. The more I do it, the more it becomes a habit of chanting attentively. And when something becomes a habit, then I reach the higher stages. In fact, it becomes easy. Imagine that you have a habit of chanting attentively. It becomes easy, it becomes natural. And because it becomes easy and natural, I make far more advancement. Because I make far more advancement, I get much more spiritual taste, ecstasy, and steadiness for my spiritual practice. So I hit Nishta and I hit Ruchi very quickly. But because no one ever told me why I should be attentive, I think, yeah, I heard that in the class before, big deal, doesn't make a difference. Just like that, in that group, the individual who was not giving certain things in on time, he didn't understand the why. He didn't understand the importance of it. Therefore, he didn't prioritize it. And ladies and gentlemen, we're often the same. We don't understand the mechanism. And because we don't understand the mechanism, we don't have the proper motivation. Okay. So we want to really encourage each other to really understand the value of the wise application of spiritual practice, which will give us exactly what Narada is talking about here. By that mechanism, we're the mechanic using the correct mechanism to become properly motivated. What do I mean by we're the mechanic? We need to fix this spiritual television within the heart. And by doing so, we'll be able to experience the miracles, the mercy, and the ecstatic presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead at a much faster rate. Okay, so let me pause here and open up for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much for that wonderful class and some very practical examples. Anyone has any questions? Yes. You want to come here?
Hare Krishna. Vaishaka Vijaka Sindhu Vijaka Vikanam Pavanam Vaishnava. Really, I have a question to myself first. I'm practicing Krishna consciousness 30 years, and so far I'm unable to chant properly. Attending chanting. Can you give me some Guru Mantra for that?
Did you ask for some? That was the last part of the question. Can you give me some
Guru Mantra.
Guru Mantra? The Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is the mantra, but it's about how we practice that mantra. You know, there's many things you can do. I'll tell you something I was thinking about recently. There's many different forms of advice that have been given in the scriptures and by our acharyas. Different things resonate more with some people than others. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says something very interesting. I'm a very visual person. Bhaktivinoda Thakur advises that one should chant blindfolded. I'm not saying that you should do that. You have to see what works for you. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur, think about this. In the age that we are in, where there's so much visual stimulation through technology, smartphones, he actually says that you should actually blindfold yourself and then chant. Isn't that an interesting technique? Because if you actually are blindfolded and then you're chanting, even if someone's pinging you on your mobile phone, you won't see it. And if you keep doing it, it becomes a habit, you know? But the key thing I'll say to you is that we should always try to learn and grow with the association and guidance of other devotees. So what I find very, very useful and what I will recommend is to go to devotees who know you, but also go to devotees ideally who know you and who themselves have a taste for chanting. You know, I was thinking this, it actually came to me this morning. There's a gap in the devotional communities for japa coaches. You could actually have in our ISKCON communities japa coaches, and what they would do is that they would sit with people who want to improve their japa and coach them, like one-on-one or group coaching on japa. So small groups get together and it's like they're chanting together, you know, they're giving some reading together, they're giving some encouragement when the person's chanting to stay attentive until and unless it becomes a habit. So what happens is when it tips into a very healthy space is when we have a habit of attentive practice. And you could have in our entire spiritual, our ISKCON community, you could have japa coaches. And I tell you, and if devotees start to do that, there'll be huge demand for people to be japa coaches, to actually have one-on-one sessions with people and to actively, you know, maybe a few times a week on Zoom or in person, coach them to develop new habits in their chanting. And that came to me this morning. But it came off a class I was listening to. So I was listening to a Q&A. It was a brilliant Q&A. And in the Q&A, one of the questions that came up was about association. And because we hear in different places that one should have the direct association of pure devotees. So the speaker in the Q&A, he answered the question beautifully. And he explained, he said, actually, yes, of course, whenever we can, but you should know the mechanism behind association. He said the reason why association is so important is because association leaves the strongest samskar, the strongest impression, the deepest impressions. So if we can associate with great devotees, pure devotees, enthusiastic devotees, it actually accelerates our bhakti, because whatever we do in that association leaves deeper and stronger devotional impressions on the consciousness. He was explaining, however, even if we don't have that association, still, when we hear and read and chant attentively, when we hear classes attentively, that also leaves an impression. And of course, the more attentive, the more receptive, the deeper the impression. You see? So the key thing is, if we can associate with devotees who have taste for a particular activity, such as chanting, and get advice and blessings from them, the association, the impression that it leaves, plus our sincere endeavor, will really help us to grow and to develop our spiritual practice. Thank you for your question. Let me ask, are there any other questions or comments?
There is one in the chat saying, can you please elaborate on how we follow Krishna consciousness intelligently based on our circumstances?
Yeah. So this is a whole seminar in itself. I'll try and give one or two key highlights. What I've seen is that devotees, we often don't know how to practice it according to our circumstances. And because we don't practice Krishna consciousness according to our actual circumstances, we sometimes lack the enthusiasm in our spiritual life that we would have if we practiced it differently. I'll give you one or two examples. You see, I'm going to share my own skeptical nature. For years, in certain places in ISKCON, I would hear devotees say things like, devotees don't cooperate. And usually when a person says that, what they really mean is, these devotees don't do what I tell them, right? They don't cooperate with me, right? So usually I'm in charge and I want you to do what I tell you, right? But you're not doing it. So now I'll say, Prabhupada said, devotees don't, devotees should love, there should be love and trust, devotees should cooperate. But really what I actually mean is devotees don't do what I tell them. So I'm misapplying the philosophy. Linked to that is this idea of association. Look, when I see people do that, I say, look, devotees are cooperating, but I want you to understand, they're just not cooperating with you. And the thing I want you to ask yourself is, why is it they're not cooperating with you, but they are cooperating with other devotees? You see? So what I'm trying to get at is that, yes, ISKCON is a huge place and there's millions of devotees. So we say association. Association or sangha is a principle. The detail is which devotees you're associating with. Is that intelligent? Have you chosen wisely the correct association that doesn't give up on you, but also doesn't give in to you? In other words, have you consciously chosen association that's going to elevate you? Or is it I just hang out with whoever happens to be around and then I say, oh, I'm not going anywhere? This is what I mean by intelligent application of Krishna consciousness. So all the things that we hear about, they're principles. But then how you apply them, that requires a bit of intelligent application. You see? Another example, devotees want to chant. Yes, okay, good. But have I set my life up so I've got some quality, good time and space to chant? Or am I chanting when I'm completely burned out? So chanting is a principle, but carving out the right space to chant, that's a detail, because it has to be done according to my circumstances, ideally in the morning, of course. Okay, so we're gonna attend a spiritual festival. That's a principle, but where are you attending that festival, right? So maybe it's Kartik and you're gonna attend a spiritual program, but you have an opportunity now to attend that program in Vrindavan, where you're gonna get 1,000 times the same benefit. Okay, so you're attending the same program, the same festival, but now you're attending it in a holy dham. You're going to get even more benefit. Amazing, right? Devotees are going to engage in devotional service. Okay, but now there's an opportunity for you to do a service where you can get association of senior Vaishnavas. There's an opportunity for you to do a service where you can get to really help so many more devotees or people. There's now a chance where you can do a service where you can use your skills or capabilities to offer more quality. So it's not just the principle, it's how we apply the principle in our own day-to-day lives. And that's what I mean by intelligent following. What I often see respectfully is that we engage in Krishna consciousness, but unintelligently. And then because it's not a very wise application, therefore we have all kinds of struggles that we absolutely could have avoided. And I'll be honest, it's heartbreaking. I sometimes see the devotees, even in their grahastha ashram, it's just like a struggle. And then I'm thinking, why wasn't this person aware that just because you're a devotee and that person is a devotee, it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to get on, because you still have a conditioned nature. We're not yet self-realized. Therefore, we should have made a choice with a bit more, which was more informed by the teachings based upon our current level of advancement. So this is in Sanskrit, this is called adhikar. So to give another example, Prabhupada came to the West by himself. He suffered not one, but 2 heart attacks on his own as he was coming over, right? He had heart palpitations. There were so many things, but someone with Prabhupada's adhikar, he can do that. But we can't imitate that. So there's a finesse in spiritual life. And the subtle nuance is that, yes, you're meant to follow, but you follow according to your actual level of advancement. Some things are universal, hearing, chanting, association. But there are also some things which should be done according to your adhikar, your qualification. And if we don't do that, it becomes problematic. So this is what I'm talking about when I say we follow Krishna consciousness intelligently. And the underlying rule is that in order to even begin to approach following it intelligently, we have to have an empowered intelligence, which means that we're hearing, we're reading, and we're inquiring. Without regular hearing, reading, and inquiry, and by the way, all 3 have to go on, because otherwise you can read and hear and misunderstand. You see, that's why it's hearing, reading, and inquiry. When we do all 3 things, you have an empowered intelligence. And when your intelligence is empowered, not only can you understand better how to apply Krishna consciousness in your own situation, but you can also better understand how to help other people apply Krishna consciousness in their situation as well. So that's what I mean by following Krishna consciousness intelligently. Okay. Any other question or comment?
I'm being mindful of time, Prabhu. Are you okay to take a couple more?
If you've got time, we've got time. This is for my own self-purification. So yeah, feel free.
So there was one question. You mentioned about when some devotees praise you, even though externally we are saying that we should not, don't do it, but internally we want to hear it.
I'm speaking about myself here. I'll speak about anyone else. That's my own anata. Hands up, I admit it.
So what should be the correct response? So we understand that internally we all have that want or desire to be praised and recognized, but in terms of what should be the correct response and how should we feel about it and take that praise?
So there's 2 things to share on this. So I asked my spiritual master about this. I asked him, I said, when people praise us, how should we take it? And what he said is, what you should do is internally offer it onto Guru and Krishna. That's what he told me. So when you receive the praise, you then pass that in. You don't have to do it externally, because your Guru may not, it's unlikely to be there, but in your consciousness, in your heart, you should consider, you should pass this on. That's one thing. Now, I'll share something else that I heard from another Shiksha Guru of mine, His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj. And he shared this amazing point in the class. And when I heard it, and I started to experience it at some points, he said, when we receive praise and we take it for ourselves in an egotistical way, then it just feeds the ego. It feeds the pride and the arrogance. He said, but when we recognize actually that we don't deserve that praise. And when I say don't deserve, I don't mean that in the form of low self-esteem and we're beating ourselves up. But when I say we don't deserve, what I mean is that whatever we've done has only been possible by Krishna's grace. And I mean that scientifically, by the way. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I am the ability in man. So let's say you led the kirtan and it was really wonderful, right? So you were playing the harmonium. Someone else was playing the madanga. You had a good kartal player. The microphone was set up very nicely. Many devotees were there singing back. So that kirtan, someone says to you afterward, that was an amazing kirtan. Okay, but you sang beautifully. But that voice that you sang so beautifully with, there's been other times in your life where you had a cold or a flu and your voice was hoarse. You could hardly speak. Why were you able to sing at all? You were able to sing because you had your immune system was working and your voice came out properly. That's one point. You were able to get to the temple for the kirtan because the traffic wasn't too bad and the vehicle that you were using was working. If there'd been a traffic accident, you wouldn't have got to the temple. Okay, you were able to play the harmonium because the temple paid for the harmonium. It wasn't your own. You don't have a harmonium. But someone else put the harmonium there that you were able to use and it was working. If the harmonium was broken, you wouldn't be able to use it. There was a good madanga player. That person who was a madanga player, they've been practicing madanga for 10, 15 years and they were there in the room and they got there just like you did. There was no traffic for them. They were in good health so they could play, right? In other words, whatever we so-called did, it's only possible because of literally thousands of other arrangements which are completely outside of our control, right? Just like now, I'm speaking to you on Zoom. If my Wi-Fi goes down or there's some kind of power cut, I can't speak to you. Doesn't matter how many books I've read, how much I want to give the class. I'm dependent on a range of other circumstances which have nothing to do with me. So when we say we're not the doer, it's not, oh, it's a sentiment, we just feel that way. And, it's like, no, it's a reality. It's a logical fact. Whatever I want to do is only possible if so many other factors which are outside of my control fall into place. And who allows those other factors to fall into place? It's Krishna. So Srila Radhanath Maharaj, when he was talking about this, he said, when we receive this praise and we don't feel that we deserve it, we know that there are so many other factors that made this happen, whatever we're being praised for, then we experience that praise. He said, instead of it going to the ego, which eats it up and is greedy for more, that praise touches the heart and it's experienced as causeless mercy and love. Think about that. So he said, when you receive it like that and you don't feel that, yes, I deserved it. It's not an egotist. It's not the ego receiving it. It's not like, yeah, actually, you know what? It's about time you realize how wonderful I am. And you know what? What you're praising me for, actually, that's only 10%. I also did this as well. Now, come on, praise me for that too. You see, when it's received in the proper mood, it actually generates such a deep feeling of love and being appreciated and being valued in a way that stimulates literally the soul. So that's the way that we should receive it. Yeah, and it's not a sentiment. It's recognizing that actually even the abilities that we have, we didn't create that ability. When you'll see carefully, if you study many people are born with certain traits. Some people are good at management. They had that samskar from birth. Maybe they went on 1 or 2 courses which refined what they had. But the samskar is there from birth. It's not like, I made myself a great manager. No, it's a samskar that Krishna allowed you to have. So this is the mood. This is the actual understanding. Yeah. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Prabhu. We'll just take one more. And
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dhanavad Pranam Jai Shri Prabhupada. Very beautiful class, first of all, Prabhu. Thanks for being with us. I was reading the purport and I was thinking Srila Prabhupada is one of the greatest kavis, poet or writers, because which poet has written 18,000 purports and Bhagavad Gita and so many books. We know every word that Srila Prabhupada writes is transcendental, but in every of his purpose, we see there is one, key point that we should take away home. As you said, we should work on that. And actually, I was thinking about that spiritual television, and no wonder you came back to that line, and that shows us how much you love Srila Prabhupada. When I was thinking of that spiritual television, and I was thinking that even in this material world, we need some eyes to see a television. So to see that spiritual television, Prabhu, I was thinking about that verse. What is that? Prema Anjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sada Hridaya Vilokayanti Yana Shama Sundar Achintya Guna Swarupam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I was thinking how I can see that spiritual television, Prabhu, where I can get that those eyes with a, as Prabhupada says, with a pulp of love of Sri Krishna. And sometimes, Prabhu, we feel that we can see that television, but we fall down again, Prabhu, in this mode of passion sometime, where we are trying to enjoy our own senses instead of serving the words of Guru Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada, and instead of serving Krishna. So, Prabhu, please, in a few words, let us know how to be on that platform always, where we can see Krishna always, and how to have that love of Krishna in our eyes so we can see that spiritual television. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you for a wonderful question. It's interesting that you asking that question. I was thinking about something related to this yesterday. To be very honest with you, we in the conditioned state, we are like a person who's walking around like a war zone. There are many war zones in the world where they have all these different landmines all around the ground. And we're trying to get from one side of the war zone to safety. But we can't see, we don't know where the landmines are. So, this is why this point about amanitvam, humility, is so important. What does humility mean? Humility means I recognize I can't see everything. And then the second thing is pridelessness. What does pridelessness mean? Pridelessness allows me to recognize that there are other people who can see more than I can, i.e. the spiritual master. Okay, so then there's a third factor. The third factor is surrender. So first of all, I'm humble enough to recognize I have faults. I can't see everything. That allows me to be open to hearing and learning. Then the pridelessness means I have to recognize there are personalities who are far superior to me, such as all of you, right? So that pridelessness. So these people can see more, these devotees can see more than I can. And then the third factor is surrender. Surrender means I can now follow. So this tatvidi pratena priprasnena sevaya upadikshanti jnanam jnaninas tatpadashinha. What is happening? What is happening is that I'm on the battlefield and I'm completely blind. But my spiritual master can see. So therefore, he starts directing me. Walk left, stop. Don't even take another step in front of you. Take 2 steps to the right. Yeah, and then he's taking me around all the landmines of the material world, all the different traps of Maya. Okay, and not only that, while he's doing that, he's also giving me instructions as to how to take a certain type of medicine. And what is that medicine doing? It is actually it is curing the disease condition. It is curing the disease condition. In Krishna consciousness, we're not learning to see. We're actually restoring our original sight. In other words, this pramanjana charita bhakti vilochanena, this is the original condition of the living entity. Love for Krishna is our original condition. The material energy that we're in and the material identification, that's our artificial situation. To use an analogy, someone has been drowning underwater for a long time, right? And they're almost about to die. Then someone dives in and pulls them out. You pull them out of the water, what happens? They're breathing, but their breathing is very labored. Is their breathing labor? Is labored? Is it labored because that's unusual for them? No, breathing is normal for every human being. Why is it so unusual and artificial at this time? It's because they've just come out of a very unnatural situation. So as we come out of the unnatural situation of being in the material energy, the bhakti that is natural, first of all, it feels strange. It feels labored. You know, I've got to do this, chant this, read this, hear this, associate like this. At first, it feels unnatural, but it feels unnatural because we're coming out of an unnatural situation. But that same person who was almost drowning, who's now been saved, after a while, that breathing will become again natural. Okay? In the same way, this Pramanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena, that comes as we remove those things which are artificial to the real self. There's a saying that perfection is not when there is nothing more to add. Perfection is when there is nothing more to take away. So just like a great sculptor, Krishna is the ideal sculptor. What does he do? In this Cheto Darpana Marjanam, he's sculpting, he's taking away everything that is artificial to the soul, removing it. The practice of Bhakti Yoga is removing all that is artificial to the soul. And then all that is left is our real consciousness. Therefore, the example that's given is this Cheto Darpana Marjanam, cleansing the mirror. It doesn't say constructing a mirror. It says cleaning the mirror. If the mirror was in its natural state, we would be able to see Krishna and see ourselves. The mirror would have its complete reflective power. But the mirror is covered with so many millions and billions of lifetimes of material contamination, so the dust is all there, so we can't see anything. That doesn't mean that the mirror is dysfunctional, it's just covered. So we have to clean away the dust so we can actually see the reality once again. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhu. I see that we're already at 9:30. So if there are any further questions, I know there is a question on chat as well. Please send those questions to Malvika Mataji, and then she can forward them to Prabhu and get you the answers.
Prabhuji, there is a question. Why God create world and what is the reason behind it?
I'm going to pause there. I'm going to check with the organizers in terms of time first, or if that's something I should just message Malvika about. What say the organizers?
Yes, I think you can message to Malvika Mataji, and then you can forward it to her.
Okay, no problem. By the way, it's a great question. Thank you for the question.
So with that, thank you again for giving us the opportunity to listen to you, to hear from you, and hopefully we get this on a regular basis, that you're able to join us for our Bhagavatam class. And hopefully you're able to get here in person and we're able to get your association that way.
We're trying to arrange that this year. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Take care, and thank you for allowing me to share something for my own purification. Very grateful. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.